time when we learned grammar as a subject. And if you're like me, most of you aren't, you're younger than me. Anyway, if you're like me, you learned that there were grammar rules, and you should not violate those grammar rules because there was something wrong with doing so, and probably something wrong with you too. In reality, there is no such thing as a grammar rule. This is something that strikes people as odd. Grammar is actually a sub-area within the study of linguistics. And grammar is the study of how clauses and phrases are constructed. It's a structural issue. For example, I can say, he ain't got no money. And that's perfectly grammatical because there's a verb phrase in there and there's a clause in there as well. Now, that sentence has some structural issues, though, and that gets us into the issue of syntax. Syntax is how words are combined to produce meaning. And the problem with he ain't got no money is, first of all, that it uses a non-standard word, ain't, which is considered to be illiterate or sometimes even offensive, depending on your audience. And it also has a double negative in it. So what I want to stress, the point of that little excursion into grammar land, is that really these issues that we're talking about with law counters are not grammatical issues at all. They're stylistic or usage issues. You can use language well or you use language poorly, but it's very difficult to use it absolutely incorrectly unless nobody can understand you. Okay? With that in mind, let's talk a little bit about one area in grammar, parts of speech. If I had a $50 bill, how many of you could name the parts of speech right now? Like reel them off. That's what I thought. Well, don't worry about it. I thought English was and I'm not sure I could do it because it doesn't really matter that much. One of those parts of speech, though, is the conjunction. Does that ring a bell with anybody? Conjunctions? Look thoughtful and go like this.
Mm-hmm. Conjunction, junction, what's the function?
Oh yeah, conjunctions. I was just thinking about that today. Here's where we get into our odd counter dilemma. Conjunctions are extremely important pieces of language, but they appear, several of them appear on our little odd counter list there that gets checked off every week. There are three basic kinds of conjunctions. The first kind is the coordinate conjunction. Coordinate conjunctions, I want to read the actual definition so I don't mess it up. Coordinate conjunctions connect two or more words, phrases, or clauses of equal syntactical importance. Here's some examples of them. He doesn't smoke or drink. Okay, Joe, don't note this one. Even though it's on your
I didn't flinch.
Right. Here's the deal. Smoke or drink are equally important syntactically in terms of the meaning of the sentence, right? They have equal ranking. Whoever he is doesn't do either one or the other of them. Perfectly acceptable to use the word or in that sense. Here's another one. She walked home and ate dinner. There again, walked home and ate dinner have equal importance, equal ranking in terms of syntax, in terms of the meaning they're transmitting. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, by the way, as Chip mentioned, if questions come up, feel free to ask them while I'm speaking. Finally, the other example, he hit the ball and he scored. Those are actually two what are called independent clauses. Each one of them could be a separate sentence. He hit the ball could be a separate sentence. And he scored could be a separate sentence as well. But since they're equal ranked syntactically in terms of meaning, it's mandatory almost to use a conjunction between them. So if you heard the words and, or, and I use the word so also, and I'll explain why that's correct in a moment, those are not incorrect. They shouldn't be marked on our odd counters little list there. A second kind of conjunction is called the correlative conjunction. Those appear in pairs, always appear in pairs. Correlative conjunctions appear in pairs to connect words or groups of words of equal syntactical importance. The main ones are either or, neither nor, and not only but. And as you can see here, here's how it works. He is not very tall, but he is coordinated. Okay, the two halves of that have equal syntactical importance, so the not but is what you use. Both swimming and running are good exercise. They're equally important. They have an equal rank in terms of the meaning in the sentence, and so that's why you use those conjunctions. Now those two instances are pretty obvious to everybody, I think.
except Lincoln, because he was tall and uncoordinated.
Oh, good point.
Which works also.
Yeah. Reminds me of the old joke about Lincoln at Ford's Theater. Well, other than that, Mr. President, how was the play?
But he actually really enjoyed the play and laughed loudly many times, if you want to know.
Yeah, right up until John Wilkes Booth appeared back. Anyway, subordinate conjunctions are the third kind of conjunction. Subordinate conjunctions, now here's where it gets a little bit tricky. Subordinate conjunctions join independent and dependent clauses. Okay, and the most common ones of them are although, so, because, before, and though. It was hot, so everyone went home. Okay, that's an independent clause. It was hot. Everyone went home depends on it was hot. And that's because it's the reason everyone went home. So in other words, just saying everyone went home wouldn't mean much without knowing why they went home. And that's because it was hot. That means the word so is correct in that, used in that sense. It connects the two thoughts. Since he's young, he's confident. Okay, he is young is the independent clause. Since he's young is dependent. You wouldn't even know that unless somebody was talking about his confidence. In other words, his youth is the reason he's confident. Yes, Jack?
Isn't, he's young, isn't that a sentence? Complete
Yes.
sentence?
It's still a clause. You can have a clause that is a sentence, an independent clause. Okay. Now, where we get into problem issues comes up in two basic occasions. One of them is using conjunctions to chain a bunch of main clauses together. She went to the store, and she bought food, and she went home, and she cooked dinner, and on and on and on and on. You've probably heard people do that on occasion. Everything is connected up with the word and. Now, grammatically and syntactically, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's really poor usage because it creates an unpleasant chain of sentences. If it gets complicated enough, it's hard to remember what was going on at the start of the sentence by the time you get to the end of it. And so in this case, our odd counter would probably mark that down if that's the way you were speaking.
I can't read that because my eyesight. Can read that whole sentence for me again?
It says, she went to the store, and she bought food, and she went home, and she cooked dinner. There are people who, I think it's probably a product of nerves, just start chaining everything together with ands.
I would have marked that.
Yes, and well,
Rightly
you
so.
should. You would be doing your job correctly if you did so. So give yourself a point on your sheet, by the way. Once it's closed door. You see what the problem is here? It's not that it's ungrammatical. It's actually grammatical and it makes sense, but it's very poor usage, and that's why we look for it. Another way these are done badly is using conjunctions as what are called invariable particles in grammar. They're invariable because the form of the word never changes. Most English words change form depending on where it's used in a sentence, but invariable particles don't. And then they're particles because they stand separately from the meaning of the sentence. Do you remember in school, maybe some of you are too young to have done this, but do you remember sentence diagramming? Where you made those little tree-shaped diagrams with all the, if you remember them doing that, all of the words in the sentence fit somewhere in that little diagram and everything connected up to everything else. But if you were to diagram this sentence, so we gave up, you would actually have a little separate line off to the side with the word so on it. And that's because it doesn't connect to anything else in the sentence. It's called a particle because it just sits on it. It's not a component of the sentence. Now this is actually grammatical and it makes sense syntactically, but it's extremely poor usage because the particle doesn't work well. This is a habit that some speakers get into. They start every sentence with the word so. We've heard that occasionally in here, but Bobby's trying to duck down really hard. It's an easy habit to get into. There's one of the Food Network TV chefs, Anne Burrell. She has spiky blonde hair. You may have seen her. A couple of years ago, started every single sentence, and she'd say, so, and then she'd do a sentence, and then so, and she'd do a sentence. So, this season, I know she doesn't do that. I have a feeling they assigned her a speech coach and to have it on. So whoever that person is, we need to find them, Bobby. Anyway, The word and can do the same thing. And he was broke. You'll hear people start every sentence with the word and sometimes, or maybe not every sentence, but lots and lots and lots of sentences. Just change them all together. And the other one, or we can drive. What this means is that in terms of our all-counter grammarian duties, these are the things that we need to look for. The other uses of the conjunctions are actually perfectly acceptable. And that accounts also for why it's so common to hear the all-counter get up and say, well, you had two ands, but I don't know if they were used incorrectly or not. And that's why, because our normal language sense is telling us they were used as regular conjunctions and not as either chain words or variable particles. They're easy traps to fall into. Mostly it's just laziness or nervousness or something like that that causes us to speak this way. So the next time you are the odd counter at the meeting, keep that in mind. It's actually a simple job to look for those words and, or, so, and whatnot, because you're only looking for two different things. Are there any questions at the end, since only one person had them at the beginning? Apparently not. You're dumbfounded with my